fiction. Welcome to our first lesson of fiction, which is called Building the World of the Story. Our goal today is to set you up and get you prepared for creating and structuring a plot diagram for your book club book. We're going to do a little bit of review on fiction in this PowerPoint. First of all, we're going to talk about the different types of fiction very briefly, the different genres that we see. We're going to go back and explain and define some basic story elements. So characters, setting, plot, conflict resolution. These are the basic elements that we have already discussed this year, but we are reviewing. You are going to take a look at the structure of the plot diagram again. We're going to do a little review of that. And then the ultimate goal is for you to apply each of these to your own book club book that you have chosen. So the types of fiction genres that you may encounter include, but not limited to, the traditional literature, which is any stories that have been passed down from one group to another throughout history. So we're looking at legends and myths and tall tales and fairy tales, and those are all traditional literature. Fantasy would be a make-up believe story, right? So we made that story up because we have things in there, like elements in the story that just cannot possibly happen, such as talking animals, right? We don't see animals talk in everyday life, so we call that a fantasy. Science fiction, sort of like fantasy, but now we're using a lot of science and technology in the literature, sometimes medicine. Realistic fiction, just like the circuit, right? The circuit is realistic fiction in that the characters are made up, but it could actually be happening. It could actually be a true story. Historical fiction, right, which is my favorite genre, where you're taking a particular time period and you have a fictional story during that time period, right? The setting is very real, but the characters are made up. And then the mystery is, of course, a suspenseful story, right? Everybody enjoys a good whodunit, clues, and there's always something that needs to be solved at the end of the story. So these are just a few of the types of fiction genres, and your goal right now is to be thinking about your own book club book. What genre do you think your book club book falls into? Story elements, we have characters and setting and plot and conflict and resolution, and this should all look very familiar to you. We have gone over these this year with Bridge Home and also with Seed Folks. But let's review character. So who are the characters? What are their names? What are their physical traits? How do they appear or look? What kind of people are they? So now you get in from the outside of the physical appearance of the character to internally, what is this character like? So we say this is part of the exposition of the story, which we know the exposition is like the background, right? It's the background. But characters develop over time. And so as you read the novel, you're going to get to know the characters. And as we know, and I put a short little video for you in your Schoology on characters, because it reviews the fact that characters change because they interact with other characters, they make decisions, and they have behaviors, and all of those things that you can tell that a character is being affected by the dialogue from the character, and so it develops, it changes, right? The characters in Bridge Home, they didn't always stay the same, right? We saw changes as time went on, and so when you are working with characters, it's important, we'll review this again when we look at the plot, you need to make sure that you recognize where those characters have changed and developed over time. Setting, same thing, a very important part of the story. A lot of people put that in the exposition and we say, okay, the setting is where and when does it take place? And for short stories, that's okay. But as a setting, as the setting of a story in a novel can change, we need to keep track of that in our plot diagram as well. And we need to be also thinking about how the setting can affect the characters and the plot, because it does. Okay, the setting can play a key role into the development of both the plot and the change in the characters. Conflict and internal versus external conflict are at the top, but what I want to talk to you about first is plot. The plot includes the events that move the story along. So you have major events that occur. Conflict is the whole reason that your novel is a good novel, because there has to be some kind of issue or problem, right? And sometimes there is one major conflict and then lots of other tiny problems that go along with it. So you're going to uncover, or hopefully uncover, a main conflict in the story, right? And then other little problems that kind of feed into that main conflict. So a conflict is just the struggle. You're looking for the main one. And you can categorize them as both internal or as either internal or external. We talked about this too. So internal conflicts. We're talking about mentally or emotionally, how what is going on within the character, right? Mentally or emotionally within themselves. Externally, an external conflict are things that the character really has not as much control with, right? Because things are happening to them. So we'll have a further lesson on that. We'll go over this again and get into more detail, but I want you to be thinking about the different way that you can describe the conflict. Now, the conflict becomes to become uncovered as the plot progresses, right? So the rising action goes up the mountain and you're starting to say, okay, this is what's happening, and it's starting to get more and more intense. The intensity that occurs and the fact that, it all comes together at one point where it's really intense, right? That's the climax. You've got the high point, the exciting point of the story. Right? So then you have the climax, it falls back down into the falling action, right? Things are starting to settle down and you have just a few events in the falling action until you reach a resolution. So the climax, the falling action, and the resolution all happen towards the end of the novel, right? Because this is where it's all kind of like, how is this story being resolved? So let's review. I'm putting up this plot diagram for you to organize your story. You have one of these in your folder this week, and you will be responsible to complete this for your novel. Okay, so if you go down to the bottom left, you have what the exposition involves. We have the characters. You're going to list your characters. You're going to maybe add into even more spaces than the 5 spaces you have, depending on the characters that you have in your novel. You're going to describe the setting, and remember I told you the setting is something that can evolve, right? Just as the characters and their traits can evolve. So you're going to do that and just kind of keep track of your setting in there. As you move up into the plot in the rising action, you'll see there's numbers. There's 4 spaces for events. You may see, and we saw this with Bridge Home, that you may have more than what that space will allow. So you can put extra events somewhere on your plot diagram or on a different paper or on the side. You can text box those in if you want, in any way that you can get them to fit. You don't want to put every little event that happens in the novel, but try to pick the major things that are going on, and especially those related to conflict. So if you look in the bottom right corner, you're describing the conflict. You may see there's a main conflict, and then you may see lots of little other problems, and you can go ahead and separate those in that box. Okay, so then you see the climax, the turning point, how the conflict changes. Then you see your falling action, probably fit a couple events in there, and then you see your resolution, and that will, how is this resolved? How did this all come in at the end? Now, the only thing that I didn't stress to you in the top left corner, number 7, is the theme. This is the last thing that you want to do, and you're going to uncover, and if you want to throughout the novel, you can uncover, we talked about this before, several little mini themes through the novel. So you may see a theme of friendship, you may see a theme of love, you may see a theme of jealousy. You may see these and you can include them in there, but you want to wait until the very end because there should be an overall arching theme throughout the novel, something that the author, you learned from what the author wrote. So keep that in mind. The very last page is, I just want to stress to you that it's really important that you not complete your plot diagram until you finish the novel. Okay, your plot diagram should not be completely done until your novel is finished. And here is why. You have several specific events contained in your rising action. Okay, so your rising action should take you all the way over halfway through your novel. So, as you're reading through your novel, you're going to write in, specific events that are occurring, and that should be occurring, most of your novel. And then the climax, falling action, resolution, we talked about this before, is all located towards the end of the novel. All right, so you have to wait all that time to really fill in those spots in your plot diagram. There may be more than one theme, but the overall theme will encompass the entire novel. So that will occur at the end. So you need to wait for that. And then let the plot diagram really help you to organize your plot, right? All the key stuff should be written in there. Use it to help you with your writing prompts. Okay, when you go to do your book club writing prompts for your book club book, use that. You want to be able to use that as a resource, right? So if they're asking you specific questions, you can go back and you can look at it and say, oh yeah, I know a little bit more about that character. I wrote about it in my plot diagram. And take your time with the completion of the plot diagram. Try to be, as specific as you can in there. Okay, you will work through it throughout the next few weeks. So this is, like I said, something that you will complete at the very end. So I hope this was helpful to you, and you will see that you have a plot diagram in your folder and that it is ready to go for your book club book. You can put your name and your title on it, and when you start your book, you can begin the completion of it. And let us know if you have any questions. Mrs. Spencer, Mrs. Hayes, or myself, we've gone over these with you before. We're going to keep giving you little refresher courses as we move through our book club fiction unit. Enjoy your book.